Okay, well, thank you guys so much for being here. I know it's super early. I know it's a big ask. Um, really appreciate it. Seth and I lately have had the opportunity to talk to a few different people who are interested in the residency that are not from Redeemer. And yeah, which is cool and exciting. But one of the things that I love getting to talk to them about is you guys, just our volunteers. They're amazing. And I always say, like, we take what we do really seriously, and we have a really high ask of our volunteers, like being here at 6 a.m. on a Thursday. And just, I'm so thankful that you guys always step up to that ask, right? You don't have to do that. That's not lost on us. We really appreciate it. It means a lot. And I'm excited this morning that we get to jump back into these trainings. So if you've been around for a while, this has looked like, I'm looking at Mary Catherine, maybe Atlee. Y'all have been through a lot of different iterations probably of these trainings. And we took some time off in the spring just to kind of figure out what are we doing with these. And the heart behind this is basically that, in our mission statement, we talk about leading intentionally. And we think that one of the main ways that we can do that is by understanding what we're trying to accomplish and understanding what God is actually calling us to and making that our primary focus. And the reason that now it's required for everyone and not just singers with a microphone in front of their face is we believe, like I've just felt this conviction in the last year that when it comes to like the theology of worship and equipping around worship, like that's our responsibility. No other place in the church is talking about that, probably maybe at all. And so for us, like our ministry, like we set the tone for Redeemer in that way. So it's important for all of us as a ministry to understand like what is God actually calling us to in the Bible in regards to worship, and us really leading out in that as a team and as a ministry. This morning, I want to talk about specifically what we're going to talk about is physical engagement, physical expression in worship. And so when I say that, and I want to talk about not just, okay, so a little bit of context. When we talked about, this is what we wanted to talk about, okay. So in my head, I was like, cool, we did a training on this like probably 5 or 6 years ago, Hank and I put together. I was like, I'll just go back and find that. I can probably copy and paste most of it, rock and roll, easy enough. But when I went back and looked at it, it was like, here's all the examples of like physical expression in the Bible. Sweet, like let's do it, And that's good. We're going to talk about that. But it's like, but why? Like where, like why is that part of, like why is that in the Psalms? What is God calling us to? Like what's the bigger picture here? And so I want to talk more from that. And honestly, it kind of went a totally different direction than I expected when I like started kind of really diving into that. And I hope not halfway through you're like, this is weird, what are we talking about? But hopefully you'll get there. You'll understand that I'm trying to provide the context for those examples that we see in the Bible. And so when I say we're going to talk about physical expression in worship, you probably react one of a few ways, okay? Either you're like, finally, like, let's go. Like, I see all the stoicism at Redeemer. You guys, y'all don't even know. Like, y'all need to get your hands up. Like, this is awesome. Let's do this. Or maybe you're like, this makes me really uncomfortable. And I come from a background where everyone's clapping on 1 and 3, maybe, and no one's raising hands. And when I see people do that, it just seems like really emotional, like, bleh, I don't really get it. Like, it just seems like we're putting on a show. Maybe that's where you're coming from. Maybe you're coming from, like, yeah, like I engage physically, but honestly, I don't really know why. It's just something we do. Like, I just have seen people do it, so I do it, and it seems like it's genuine in my heart, but I don't really understand why. And so my hope is that wherever you're coming from, you'd understand, like, what the Bible says about this, what God's heart is for it. And so when I say this kind of went a different weird way than I expected, was I just started thinking about, like, why did God put us in bodies? Like, why did God make us embodied souls, and does that matter? What's the significance of that? Because it's like, until we understand God's design and purpose for our bodies, those outputs don't really make sense. Like, they're not attached to anything, right? They're just an action maybe you're doing. So the body that we bring to corporate worship, the way you view your body, it's not just a problem to be solved. It's not, our bodies are not something that we're trying to just work around, right? Like, it's really about your mind and intellectually, like, understanding the words you're singing, or just in all of life. Like, it's really about our souls. Like, God, he wants our souls, and our bodies is just kind of where we're at right now. And so it's just something that I'm trying to tame. Like, I'm trying to tame the desires of my body. It's an innately bad thing. It's fading, all of those things. So why then? Our problem is that we don't know what to do with our bodies, right? Like, when I was writing this, I just kept thinking about, I don't know what to do with my hands. Like, that like, we don't know what to do with it in the big picture, not just in worship. I mean, specifically, when I'm not playing a guitar, I'm just like, I feel so strange, but in general, we don't really understand the purpose that God has for our bodies. So that's where I want to start. And then eventually we'll get to that, like, what's the purpose of our body in worship and why. All right, so the body in the Bible. Okay, so my guess is, if you had to shoot from the hip, if I was like, hey, Emma, tell me what's the Bible say about our bodies? Okay, I'm putting you on the spot. But if I had to just say, like, what's the story of our body throughout Scripture, you'd probably walk through number one, what I'm going to call a narrative of decline. So you'd be like, yeah, God created us, like in Genesis 1, our bodies were perfect. We were made in his image, but then sin entered the world, and our bodies became broken, and we sin in our bodies, through our bodies, and also our bodies are wasting away, right? We're getting older. I have freaking a shin splint right now. It hurts so bad, like, that's true. Like, our bodies, like, they're fading away, right? They're declining. They're something that we view it's just getting us from point A to point B. We're really focused on our heart and our soul, and God's transforming us inside, but outwardly, like, we're fully wasting away. And to that, I would say that it's not wrong, right? Those things that I said are all true. And just as a quick aside, when I was putting this together, I read a book that was really good called Body of Praise. And I would mostly recommend it, but it is definitely one of those things where it's like, he's making his point. So it's like, the body is the most important thing. And it's like, yes, I understand you're making an argument. So if you read it, there's some things in there that I'm kind of like, I don't know. I think you're stretching a little bit. But, sorry, I don't know where I was going with that. Oh, yes, but so he really focuses on, like, yeah, that's narrative of decline. Like, it's not really, like, fully it. That's wrong. That's not God's, like, heart. But it's like, no, those things are true. It's just incomplete, right? So our bodies were made perfect in his image, and they are declining, but that's incomplete. That totally sets aside God's initial design for our body, and the fact that if he wanted us to not have a body, he could have done that, right? So even if it is declining, there's got to be more to it, right, than just, it was perfect when God created us, and now it's slowly wasting away with the shin splint. So what I want to do is to kind of build that out, talk about a body defined by God. So the first kind of addition I want to make to that incomplete view is that our physical bodies are not independent or secondary to the divine image that we bear as human beings. I think I have that on a slide at the top, yes. Our bodies are not separate or secondary to the divine image that we bear as human beings, right? So they're distinct. They're like, when we'll start looking at these verses, right, there are distinctions between body and soul, right? It's not that, like, it's all a homogeneous mix of goo, it's like, no, like, there are those distinctions, but let's look at Genesis 1, 26 and 27 to see that picture of it not being secondary as far as bearing the divine image. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. So this verse doesn't talk about spiritual and physical distinctively, right? It talks about God created us in his image. So all of us is made in his image, including our physical bodies, not just our soul. And so a lot of times we might think of our body as like a pair of sunglasses. That's just a covering for a soul that actually means much, much more. So if you see this, you see God's intentional design for us to be made in his image includes both our physical bodies and our spirit, our soul. Not only that, he takes great care in crafting all that we are. There's a blank slide. Okay. Psalm 139. For you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them. Right? Just the intentional, deep crafting care that God takes to make all of us, our inward parts. He knitted us together. It all matters. It all has intention behind it for him. Psalm 16, 7 through 10. I bless the Lord who gives me counsel. In the night also my heart instructs me. I've set the Lord always before me. Because he is at my right hand, I shall not be shaken. Therefore my heart is glad, and my whole being rejoices. My flesh also dwells secure. All right, so we see those distinctions. We see how they're intertwined, that they are addressed with equal weight, right? My heart's glad, and also my flesh dwells secure, right? Addressing both of those. All right. So hopefully I'm making a good case there for our bodies matter. God has intention and purpose with them from creation until now. So the next thing is that then these bodies are not at a standstill, right? These are bodies in motion. We see our bodies in motion all throughout the Bible. I want to spend some specific time in the Psalms because it's really blatant. These are just quick hits here, right? But I, through the abundance of your steadfast love, will enter your house. I will bow down towards your holy temple. Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. O come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker. Clap your hands, all peoples. Shout to God with loud songs of joy. Every day I call upon you, O Lord. I spread out my hands to you. At midnight I rise to praise you because of your righteous rules. May all kings fall down before him. All nations serve him. I mean, I could have added more and more and more and more and more of these. They're repeated often. I feel like almost every single psalm has some physical action embedded in it. We'll come back to this in a little bit to talk more about the why, but wanting to see there's ample evidence in the scriptures for these bodies in motion. And I think what's funny, it's not funny, that's me being cynical. A lot of times when we talk about the Psalms, and even the word sing, right? That's the second most frequent command in the Bible is to sing. A lot of times we are like, oh yeah, my heart bows down. My heart kneels before God. My heart lifts up its hands. My heart is singing, right? And it's there's something to that, right? That's really beautiful to be yeah, my heart posture, I'm humbled and I'm responding to God. But also, I'm not sure that's exactly what the psalmist is talking about, right? Exclusively, it's only a heart posture. Okay, so we also see bodies in motion in the New Testament. Again, could have included more examples, but for this reason, I bow my knees before the Father. We're probably even more prone to do this with the fake heart posture thing. We're probably even more prone to do it with these, I'm not going to lie. But lifting holy hands as we pray, the laying on of my hands. And then this is something I wish I had more time to build out, but in Revelation, all the language about falling down and bowing down before Jesus on his throne. And as I was studying and reading that, I was just thinking man, that's what we're going to be doing in eternity. But right now we're and it's so silly. It's to myself, right? I'm not being like, I'm not projecting that on anyone. I'm just saying like, man, like that's what I'm going to be doing in eternity. Like that's what I want to do now. Like I want to respond to God in that way. Okay. So this is where I'm going to this might be helpful and it might not. This is the next part, okay? It was helpful to me when I was studying, okay? So I want to spend some time talking about Paul's language of flesh and body because that is majorly informing how we read his writings. And he talks about both of those words. I have it on my notes here, but each of those words in Paul's writings are used like almost 150 times. So we have to know what he means when he's talking about that. And so I did like a deep dive like in my Greek lexicon, and I just want to do a quick like aside about that, about Greek, that what I'm trying to do here is not being like, but it could also mean this, but it could also mean this, because what you have to know is that the translations of the Bible that we have are really good. Like, there's no way, I have nothing to contribute to add or whatever. But the problem is that Greek is a different language than English, and so there's words that are used in multiple forms, and so that particular word, you might see it, and it actually is used several different ways. So it has nuance, but it's not like, oh, it means something different. So my point in this little section is that Paul uses the same word, flesh, and it means different things in different contexts. And so, I don't know. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but this word that he uses for flesh. So for me, when I read, Paul, I think flesh, our sinful nature. That's literally what I think. And that might be what you do too. When Paul talks about according to the flesh, in our flesh, like that, it's bad, right? It has a negative connotation in the way that I read Paul. And here's the deal, is that sometimes that's exactly what it is, right? So on this definition number 2 down here at the bottom, Romans 7:18, right? Paul's, that whole section, I do what I don't want to do, my body, that whole thing. He's using this word flesh in that way. My sinful flesh, do what I don't want to do. My body is failing me, basically. It's leading me to sin. But that same word, flesh, used like Ephesians 5:29 and 30. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body. Right? So if it meant sinful flesh, and it says no one ever hated his own sinful flesh, that doesn't make any sense, right? So my point being with all of this is that that's informing how we view our bodies, right? So when we think back to what I was talking about, this narrative of decline, my body is something that I just got to like get through, and I got to tame, and I just have to like worship God despite of it. I think we're really informed by this idea with Paul of like the sinful flesh and discerning like what does it mean when he's using it different ways, right? And then I'll talk more about this in a bit, but it's also the same word of the word became flesh, the same Greek word, right? So Jesus did not become our sinful, terrible flesh, right? He became a physical being. So my point is making that distinction between our sinful flesh and our physical bodies, that they're not always one and the same. And then furthermore, he uses this other word, soma, which means your, just literally means body. And it is primarily means like the body of a human or animal, but I included this because I thought it was really important, the underneath part, right? The body is used to mean the whole person sometimes. It's the instrument for human experience and suffering. The body is the organ of a person's activity, right? So Romans 12:1, y'all probably know that verse, right? I appeal to you, brothers, mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship, right? It's not just your physical body, it's your whole being, which also includes your physical body, right? It's both, it's all. And then there's something to be noted. If our bodies are innately bad, then why are we called the body of Christ? How about that, right? There's that language used by Paul to describe the people of God. Okay, I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on this. I just thought it was quite interesting, and I just realized I think that's coming from a personal conviction of the way that I read Paul and flesh. Flesh equals bad for me, right? And that's not the intent. Okay. The last and probably most important thing to look at when we're talking through this body, the body in the Bible, is obviously Jesus. And him coming and having a physical ministry, right? Indwelling body. So, kind of 3 points here that are kind of building. The first is, like I mentioned earlier, the Word became flesh. That same word. Through his human body, Jesus shares his divine life with us. Through his human face, he shows us the face of God. Through his mouth and limbs, he speaks the Father's word to us by what he says and what he does. With human hands, he delivers the Father's gift to us. He resides with us bodily so that we can receive God's grace and truth. The Word became a specific flesh, right? So he had a particular mother. He was born in a specific place. He had a specific type of body. He was born of a woman, born under the law, Galatians 4. We have to acknowledge that Jesus had limitations because he had a body, right? Him taking on bodily form. Drats. I'm all mixed up here. That's old. Okay, perfect. That during his earthly ministry, he had limitations, right? He goes to this town, but not the other. He embraces people. He healed this person, but not that one. So limits, like Jesus had, are always something. So they serve as a context for God's grace to be felt in the real circumstances of our lives. So instead of something that we should seek to escape, right? I talked about us feeling like we need to transcend our bodies, like work around them. Instead being like, no, Jesus had an actual physical body with limitations. He was tired. He was hungry. He was emotional. So that tells us something about the heart of God, his purpose for our bodies, and how we interact with him. It's a way for us to see God's grace to us. And then lastly on this is that the Word became a wounded flesh, right? In John 20, Jesus appears to the disciples after the resurrection, and he shows them his wounds, which he still has, which is interesting, fascinating. So it's not that is evidence that he became acquainted with our limitations, our hurt, our physical experience, right? So when you think about Jesus as the perfect high priest interceding for us, him taking on a physical body is like imperative to that, right? And then lastly, just considering like Jesus is taking on a physical body is what allowed him to die for our redemption, right? It's huge. Okay, so there's my case. That's the case I'll make of this weird body thing we're on. It's probably not where you saw this going. It wasn't where I saw it going. Okay, so then, what do we do with it? Theology of the body applied. So my hope is that you can really see God's purpose for our bodies, and that informs what you do with it, right? That's what we're trying to get to. So I want you to consider this. We must respond to God with our entire being. So if both are important to God, or all, body, mind, soul, however you want to think about it, he's designed us as whole people, then we have to respond to his word, his nature, his glory with our entire being, with all that we are. So here's the thing, is that I think that I could almost be 100% confident that you do this in other parts of your life, right? So some examples that I think about are like, me, Seth, and Avery are sitting in a meeting, and I'm on my computer, I'm typing, and like a text pops up, and it's from my mom, and it's a picture of the baby, right? And I click on it, and I smile so big, because I'm like, oh, she's so cute, right? And I'm like, I turn to my computer, like, Seth, guys, look how sweet, right? Or like thinking about, like I go pick up Lakin from school, and she sees me, and she puts her arms like this, and she's like, Mommy! And she runs to me, and it's like she's been at the war, she just got home from war, it's like been like 6 hours, but it's like she's never seen me, she's so excited to see me, right? Or like when, my husband says something like really kind, like really encouraging to me, and I like come kind of like, oh shucks, like, but it's like actually my eyes are a little teary, like, I'm responding to that. Or like, you get a call that's like, something bad happened to someone you love, your heart starts racing. Maybe you like cry and you cry like with your whole body, we do this all the time, right? We're always responding to what's happening around us in a physical way, right? We're not just like, Lakin's not like, mommy, and I'm like, right? Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so excited to see you, tell me about your day, right? So I think that when it comes to God, we get really weird about it, right? We get really weird about it. And I think that it can't be overstated enough how much your own, like, church background and what you've seen and experienced, like, how much it influences how you view this topic. Like, that can't be overstated enough, right? For me, I came from, like, was raised in a church that was, like, we were clapping. It was probably on 1 and 3, mostly. But no one was raising hands. And so then when I got older and I saw that, it was, like, really uncomfortable for me and also maybe even a little bit off-putting at times. And maybe that's your experience, or just kind of like, that seems dramatic. And, like, maybe, like, even I think I kind of viewed it as, like, attention seeking a little bit. Like, look at me and look, I'm, like, really into this, It's kind of how I interpreted it. But it's because I didn't understand all the things that we just talked about, right? From a worldly standpoint, it's just been misused, maybe even, and that affects how you view it. But I want us to go back to some of those Psalms passages that I shared earlier, and I want you guys to see, I purposely hid the context of them on that first slide. And actually, I just realized, though, hold on. Okay, I just realized that's not that helpful. I just put the references. But this is something that someone taught me a long time ago, that our physical response should always be tied and attached back to the character and work of God, right? So what you see in those Psalms, man, I really wish I wouldn't have done that. Does anyone do y'all have Bibles, or can y'all pull your phone? I think that would be most helpful, to actually read them and not just me shoot from the hip and just tell you what it says. I don't think that gets the point across. Can someone read Psalm 5, 4 through 7? Okay.
You are not a God who takes pleasure in evil. With you the wicked cannot dwell. The arrogant cannot stand in your presence. You hate all who do wrong. You destroy those who tell lies. Bloodthirsty and deceitful men, the Lord abhors. But I, by your great mercy, will come into your house. In reverence will I bow down toward your holy temple.
Yeah, so what I'm talking about as far as, like, it's always attached to the work of God. So when we go back to these examples in the Psalms, the psalmist is saying something about who God is and what he done, and so I do this, right? Always. So in that one, like, that one's really interesting because it's, like, about God's holiness and his wrath, and it's like that leads to an actual physical response of bowing down. Okay, Psalm 33, 6 through 8.
By the word of the Lord the heavens were made, their stereo hosts by the breath of his mouth. He gathers the waters of the sea into jars. He puts the deep into storehouses. Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the people of the world revere him.
Awesome. I don't know if that's the right verse. Is that Psalm 33, 6 through 8? I might have written down the wrong thing.
Yeah, it says stand in awe.
Okay, stand. Thank you. Okay, that's probably it. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so standing in response to God as creator and sustainer. Psalm 95, 56. Can anyone read that one?
For the Lord is a great God and a great King above all gods. In his hand are the depths of the earth. The heights of the mountains are his also. The sea is his, for he made it, and by his hands formed the dry land.
Keep going, I think.
No, sorry. O come, let us worship and bow down.
Yeah.
Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker.
Yeah, again, creating the world, this picture of this big God, sovereign over all creation. And so we kneel and we bow down. Yep. Next one. 88.
You have put me in the lowest part of the pit, in the darkest places, in the depths. Your wrath weighs heavily on me. You have overwhelmed me with all your waves. You have distanced my friends from me. You have made me repulsive to them. I am shut in and cannot go out. My eyes are worn out from crying. Lord, I cry out to you all day long. I spread out my hands to you.
Yeah. That one's really intense because it's like God is sovereign in suffering, and the psalmist knows that, and that's why, like, he's asking those questions, but then to be like, I'm helpless, basically. So I stretch out my hands to you. 47, 1 through 4. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay. Oh, clap your hands, all peoples. Shout to God with the voice of joy. For the Lord Most High is to be feared, a great king over all the earth. He subdues people under his feet and the nations under his feet.
Right. He's God over all. And so that's why we clap and shout, right? Last one, Psalm 134, 1 through 3.
Come, bless the Lord, all of you servants of the Lord, who stand by night in the house of the Lord. Lift up your hands to the holy place, and bless the Lord. May the Lord bless you from Zion,
Yep.
he who made heaven and earth.
Again, it's attached. He who made heaven and earth. He's reigning in Zion. Lift your hands to him. So that, to me, this was the missing piece for me when I talk about, like, it was off-putting to me, or like I didn't really get it, and just sort of like, or so if you're someone who like does respond physically but you don't really know why, this is why. Like, so when we sing, your name is the highest, your name is the greatest, your name reigns above them all thrones, dominions, all powers, positions, your name stands above them all. It's like, that's literally like the Psalms. This is what we should be doing, right? That should cause us to respond with our whole being, our mind, our heart, and our soul. Okay, so that's all I have from my spiel. And I didn't even get into, like, glorify God in your body, do all things for the glory of God, right? Like all of those other positive Paul things about the body, and I didn't even get into that. But I hope that that's helpful in just like giving you an understanding of why, what, how to use your body in worship. And so I want to close with some discussion questions. So you can just grab 2 or 3 people around you. And then when you guys finish this up, you're free to go. Okay, you don't have to stick around. Yeah, thanks again so much for being here. I hope it was helpful. Hope you feel like it was worth your time.